came here in 1986 to run it for myself in October. I signed the papers and I was owner of the Red Barn Incorporated. People come in here for the experience, more so than I think anything else. And they love the fact that somebody's actually taking the time to listen. Find that balance between doing what you love that isn't really work, that might pay the bills, and more importantly, can resonate with people and actually to some extent help people. That's pretty rewarding. Without my customers, I would be doing what I don't love, guaranteed.
In child.
Actually, if Lana's there, ask for her if she's the owner.
Okay. Good evening. Welcome to a regularly scheduled meeting of the Waterville City Council. If anybody needs an agenda, they are on the plastic sleeve on the back wall. And before we get started, I will ask Steve Soul to please stand and lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First up is Community Notes. Community Notes is a time where if anybody has something they would like to say or speak about that is not currently scheduled on the agenda to be discussed tonight, now would be the time to do it, and we would just ask that you come to the podium, state your name, and tell us where you live. Is there anybody for Community Notes?
Hello, Julian Payne, Ward 5. One of the things I'd like to do, being on the school board, is to touch base in community notes just to keep the council up to date with pertinent information with the schools. So it's not, we're more current with daily issues. And it's also a good opportunity because this is actually televised, so residents of Ward 5 actually view this unlike school board meetings. As you know, the AOS 92 is being discussed for dissolving, but it's actually going to referendum. So my concern is that this general consensus is to break it down, but it's a vote. So the councillors are going to have to talk to their constituents and emphasize the importance of this and get the voter turnout, because this AOS could break down and then the community could vote not to do it, leaving us in a bit of a sticky situation. There is 3 school board members that are actually on the AOS board: Marion Bernier, Elizabeth Bickford, and Sarah Sylvester, who are very knowledgeable in that department. We had the Mid-Main Tech Center, which was a great event. And there's a bill on the books, LD 1761, which is dealing with guns on school property that you might find interesting. So that's basically what's going on there, which led me to think of budget. And contrary to popular belief, I wasn't listening to Fox, it was actually NPR. And they were talking about the reevaluation that's happening in Portland. And what I learned from that, state law recommends, somewhat dictates that it should be in a 30% window. And I believe what happened in Waterville, about 33% went to 60%. So over average house price going up $1,000, that's about $330 if we evaluate it every 5 years and don't leave it to the 16. I think the fact that it was left to 16 was a big sticker shock. So that was about 2 years ago with budgets. Maybe if the council looks for an evaluation in 3 years from now, I certainly wouldn't do another budget repeal because I've dodged enough bullets, but I'm sure if the community again waited 16 years, there'd be another group that would jump into that situation. So I think keeping it within that window is very important for getting what you want. I know that costs money, but so do budget repeals, and so when things get defunded. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And you're right. A lot of that was because the people who had been elected here prior to any of the people who are here now had kicked that can down the road for like 20 years. So it's a good point. It should be done much more frequently like other towns do, so it's not a big shock. Is there anybody else for community notes? Yes.
I just wanted to remind everyone that there will be a public presentation of an event that I can never pronounce, Pachakacha Pechu.
That's how they say it. Yeah.
On Friday night at Thomas College. The reception begins at 6:20. There are a couple presenters who will be, I think, of particular interest because they involve issues that involve the City Council. One is on the Riverwalk program. Lisa Halley is going to be presenting Waterville Comes to the River. Todd Martin's also going to be presenting on a plastic bag-free town. And since Jennifer is here, we also, I know, have a pizza making lesson by Jonathan Rosenblum, which is going to be awesome. And several other, I think it's a total of 7 presenters. So that's going to be a great event at Friday at Thomas College.
Thank you. Anybody else for community notes? Okay, we'll have disclosure of conflict of interest. Is there anybody on the council who feels they have a conflict of interest in voting on any of the agenda items tonight? Council?
I'll be abstaining from Resolution 21, 2018.
Okay. All right, and now we have what everybody, I'm sure, has been waiting for, the presentation of the auditor's report. Welcome.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. My name is Eric Netto. I'm a partner with Nicholson Michaud and Company, and we're here to present the audit of fiscal year 17 for the city. What you have in front of you is you have a copy of the draft financial statements. They are in draft form only due to timing. We are going to be issuing those within the next week. They are final from a numbers perspective. And you also have a copy of the presentation that I'm going to walk you through this evening. Starting on slide with independent auditor's report. The financial statements are the responsibility of management. Our responsibility as your auditor is to express an opinion on those financial statements based on our audit. We conducted our audit in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States. Those standards provide reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. And we did issue an unmodified opinion on the fiscal year 17 financial statements. That's a clean opinion for the city. Financial statement presentation. Your financial statements are organized as follows. We present government-wide financial statements. Those report your financial statement on a full accrual basis. We report capital assets in the government-wide financials, long-term debt, net pension liability, and other various other accruals. We also issue fund financial statements, general fund, capital projects, special revenue. Those are reported more on a current financial resources basis or a modified accrual basis, and they provide more of a short-run perspective. We also provide a reconciliation between the government-wide financial statements and the fund financial statements within the package there. Now we're going to get into a few slides that look at some trend information on some of the key areas for the city. Taxes receivable and liens in the general fund were approximately $1.2 million, approximately $200,000 decrease over prior year. Taxes receivable were approximately $915,000, and your tax liens were approximately $308,000 for the fiscal year. This next slide shows your the last 5 years, your property tax collection rate. It's about 94.33% in fiscal year 17. Obviously, that represents the portion of your tax levy that was collected within fiscal year 17. There's additional information on the tax levy for the city on page 29, note 4 in your financial statements. This next slide shows your property tax rates over the last 7 years. For the 2016-17 budget year, there was a 5 mil decrease in the mill rate. So the year under audit, the mill rate was 22.8. And for fiscal year 17-18, the mill rate, there was a 0.53 mil increase up to 23.33. This next slide shows your trends in your long-term debt levels. Your long-term debt, bonds and notes payable, were approximately $21.5 million at the end of fiscal year 17. Again, this outstanding balance is reported in the government-wide financial statements. The long-term debt payments, your principal and interest payments, are reported as an expenditure in the fund financial statements. Your current year decrease was approximately 2.2 million, or 9% overall reduction in your long-term debt.
Does this include the bonds that like Thomas took out through us, or is that's theirs?
That's theirs.
That's theirs, it's
Right.
not included in this either.
Right.
They just used this as big.
These next several slides are going to deal more with your fund balance. Okay, fund balance, general fund, the city and school combined at the end of fiscal year 17 was approximately 5.4 million. In prior year, it was about 6.1 million, so there was a decrease of approximately 720,000 in the overall general fund balance in fiscal year 17. We'll talk more a little bit more about that later. Your unassigned fund balance for the city at June 30th, 2017 was approximately 4.3 million. A portion of the city's general fund balance has been assigned to the fiscal year 18 budget period, and that amount was 780,000. This next slide shows the trends in the school's general fund balance. The general fund balance for the school at the end of fiscal year 17 was approximately 198,000. That was a decrease of 304,000. The school had budgeted approximately $498,000 of their fund balance to be utilized in this current fiscal year 16-17 budget period. They utilized 304,000. So they had an overall favorable budget to actual variance of approximately 194,000.
Eric,
Yes.
so if we added the balances on page 11 and 12, would that equal the balance on page 10? Are those two things combined, or is there something else that contributes to that fund balance?
On page 10, where we're showing the general fund,
That's school and city, right?
on page 10, the unassigned fund balance for the city, that's just the city's
I think you
portion.
mean page 9, Mike.
Are you talking about page 9?
Oh,
Yes,
I'm
page,
looking at yesterday's copy.
yeah, page
You forgot
9,
page
yeah.
9, sorry.
Page 9 does include both the city and school.
Cool, okay. I'm one page ahead of you because we took one page out.
That's all you could get?
That's all I could get out of it. Take one page out.
We're on page 12 here, fund balance policy calculation. So at the end of fiscal year 17, the fund balance for the city, the unassigned fund balance, represented approximately 11.91% of the general fund expenditures. It's the city's council, it's the council's policy that percentage is 12%. So we're slightly below that percentage at the end of fiscal year 17. Page 13, the fund balance utilization. You can see over the past 6 years that the city has experienced favorable results when comparing budgeted fund balance utilization to actual. In the current year, the combined city and school budgeted fund balance utilization was approximately a little under 1.1 million. The city utilized 721,000. As I mentioned earlier, that was a decrease in the general fund balance. So the city had an overall favorable variance, budget to actual, of approximately 377,000. That was a combination of a $44,000 negative variance overall in revenue and a $421,000 positive variance, favorable variance in the expenditures. This next slide shows a little pie chart of your general fund revenues. Taxes, intergovernmental revenue, tuition and charges represent about 98% of the total general fund revenue. Combined, these four categories of income had positive budget to actual results, with the only negative variances compared to budget in the intergovernmental revenue area, which was under budget by approximately 84,000, and charges for services category in the city, which was under budget by approximately 14,000. Okay, the combined budget to actual is reported on page 14 of the audited financial statements. This next slide shows a little pie chart of your general fund expenditures. Education, Public Works, and Police, Fire, Communications combined represent approximately 84% of the city's total general fund expenditures. Education and Public Works both had positive budget actual results in fiscal year 17, and combined, the Police, Fire, and Communications departments had a positive variance compared to budget by approximately $57,000. Those three departments combined in fiscal year 16 had an overall negative variance budget to actual of about $6,600. Other matters, we did perform a single audit for the city. That is an audit of your federal programs. The city did not have any major federal programs in fiscal year 17. That would be a major program where you expend funds in excess of $750,000. The school did have several major programs. We audited the school lunch program this year as a major program at the school. And we did issue an unmodified opinion. We had no compliance findings or issues. Some required communications for the council. We had no difficulties in dealing with the city or the school in performing and completing the audit. The staff is very knowledgeable, very experienced, and very helpful throughout the process. We asked for a lot of information, and they're very responsive to those requests. So we had no issues or difficulties in dealing with management during the process. We had no disagreements with management during the audit about any financial reporting or disclosure matters. We discussed a variety of issues during the audit with management and staff, and we had no disagreements or issues regarding that. And again, I'd like to thank Mike and Heather and Paula and Eric and all their staff for their assistance this year in the audit. That's the conclusion of our presentation. Does anybody have any questions or concerns? Sure.
Are audits only conducted on federal funding departments of the city budget, or can they be conducted on any part of the city budget? Is there only monies that is related to federal government that are typically singled out for auditing?
Well, we perform, that's a separate engagement, that's a separate audit of the federal grant programs of the city. So we issue a separate report, and then we conduct an audit of the city as a whole as well. But anything is really subject to audit. It's really depending on what the council would like to do. And but typically, we would perform an audit of the financial statements of the city, and then the federal expenditures if it exceeds a certain level.
So basically, if this was a big company, which it kind of is, here's your financial report at the end of the year.
There are times where auditors will be engaged to perform what's called agreed-upon procedures. So sometimes organizations will engage us to review a particular area and based on criteria that's defined and outlined by management or the board or the council, and we would report based on that. That's not an audit of financial statements. It's really just performing a review of procedures that's dictated by management or the council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather, and your department as well. I'm going through that right now in my professional employment, so I know what it's like. Yeah, it's lots of fun, yes.
Well, I too wanted to thank Heather, because as Eric said, this is a clean audit, and a lot of that is due to the work of Heather and the people in her staff. But I just wanted to make you look quickly, ask you to look quickly at page 14, because that's the page that we always, as department heads, look at first, because you gave us a budget, and then the question is, did we stay within the budget? And so on that page 14, you can see all the city's departments. Now, you'll note that the mayor's budget was the first one overspent, but there's a reason for that. That includes a videotaping of council meetings. You remember we added that expense back in.
Yes.
We didn't have a budget.
That was for the people
Right.
at home.
So that's a source of that overage. The only other significant one, I think, is in the fire department. And there's almost a $15,000 overage due almost entirely, well, completely, I think, to the fact that health insurance premiums change during the year, because when firefighters leave, new people come on, they may be insured as a single, or they may have family insurance. And I think in this case, we lost two that had single insurance and took two that had family. And so that, there was a $16,000 overage in the health insurance line alone. So that explains that, but most of the other departments, as you can see, stayed well under, and as Eric noted, our total expense versus budget was to the positive of 420, as you can see in the bottom line there. A little bit short on revenues. If you look up above, you'll see we were 43,000 short. Most of that in the intergovernmental line, well, licenses and permits. Actually, the licenses and permits, we had budgeted a much higher number for permit fees because we assumed that the Kobe projects would be paying permit fees before July 1st last year. And in fact, their permit fees came in after. So I think, as most of you know, we're already well over our budget for this year in permit fees because their permits came in after July 1. So what we didn't collect last year, we already have collected this year. So this is a very, very important page as we budget for next year, looking at what our actual expenses have been and trying to find ways where we can make corrections, changes, reductions. In some cases, we may have under budgeted, but that's what we spend the next 2 months doing. That's probably the only page we wanted to comment on, pretty much. I think a couple of the really important items that we heard from Eric tonight is our debt service level, if you look at that trend, and the fund balance trend. Both of them are going down, good for debt service, not so good for fund balance.
Sorry, Mike, I was snickering only because county tax was over by $2, and I just thought.
Whoops.
You can just call it zero, I get it. That's factual reporting.
That is, exactly. Any other questions?
Nonprofits pay permit fees for buildings?
Oh,
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was surprised.
Yeah. Yep, the hospitals, Colby, Thomas.
In fact, if you look, most places around us don't charge the building permit fees that we do. And part of the reason Waterville has such high building permit fees is because who does most of the huge buildings is the nonprofits. And that's a way of making revenues from Colby and the hospitals.
Anything else? Thank you, Eric, too.
Okay, we'll move on to the approval of the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Unfinished business ordinance 2017.
An ordinance providing for adoption of marijuana moratorium ordinance. Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Waterville, acting as municipal officers as follows. That an ordinance providing for a moratorium on retail marijuana establishments, stores, and social clubs be adopted as shown on the attached.
Can I get a motion to adopt?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Okay, and we are open for discussion. Questions of the council, discussion points? All right,
I have a question,
Yes.
actually. Am I correct in understanding that the state is also, extending their consideration until May, before they make a decision about their own moratorium on this issue?
Right. They're considering it. They haven't voted on that
Right.
yet. To me, it looks pretty likely that they're going to extend the state moratorium until May, but they haven't yet voted.
If that indeed happened, we would be kind of up a creek if we did not have an ordinance of our own, or if we did not extend our own moratorium. Is that correct, Mike, in your opinion?
depends
I mean,
on. it depends
I guess that's a
It depends
subjective
on how you-
statement.
I guess it depends on how you
Right.
feel about regulation of marijuana, recreational marijuana facilities.
Well, I'm not sure I understood your question, but
Yeah.
if their moratorium gets extended,
Yeah.
then we're under the same situation we have been really for a year.
But we're not sure whether it would be or not. So this ordinance then is to bridge that gap in case that ordinance is not extended. or that moratorium is not extended.
Right,
Got it.
right. That's the point of discussing it tonight. We're just not sure what's going to happen at the state level.
So, and what would be the plan if, so the state, I mean, the state is going to come to some kind of resolution on this. It seems like the group, people are, at least from what I read in the papers, coming together. That happens, what's this next step for the city as far as how this goes?
Well, let's say that the state does not extend the moratorium and they decide to essentially take no action, you know, then the citizens' referendum vote takes effect. And unless there are rules, regulations in place at the state level, it's going to be pretty much, I don't know, free-for-all is the right expression, but all the towns are going to be on their own to develop what kind of restrictions, if any, they want to have. So when I talked to Bill Lee about it, I said if the state doesn't take any action, then, and the city of Waterville does, then we really should do it soon. If state does a moratorium until May, then we've got plenty of time. So then it would go to the planning board.
Well, that's my concern. So like last time, essentially there was, we, and I'll be a guilty party, that kind of kicked it to the planning board to say, look at it. But there was no real, it seemed like, professional guidance on these issues and real, I felt, and I went to one of those meetings, it was a more difficult community discussion. Nick, you were there, I'm sure you would agree with that. Is there a way we can have a bit more proactive, can build involvement so that there's more voices? Because that just seemed like a real clunky vehicle with little guidance, and I think, so then the planning board does the best they can with what
Right.
they have, but it's
I think the planning board, and Bill Lee said the same thing. I think the planning board was looking for direction from the council. Because as you say, they had no idea really what the boundaries or limits. They wanted some kind of direction from you.
Yeah, I could speak to it. Being on the planning board at the time, I can tell you it was very difficult to not have that direction. I mean, we really didn't know. At the time, we were looking at every facet of the marijuana ordinance, and we didn't know if the council wanted us to direct, certain areas that can be allowed for retail shops, or was it more or less in regards to caregivers versus retail shops of recreational use. I mean, there was so many different facets to this that I think would be very beneficial to have Bill step in and perhaps provide some guidance before it gets to the planning board. So many times we have, we ask for our committees and planning and boards for recommendations sometimes, and we don't generally give direction as to where we'd like them to go. I think sometimes we're punting the ball, I guess, if you will, into another court because we don't want to deal with it, and we'll just push it off to the board or the committee. It happens, but I think we should be more proactive as the mayor.
Bill suggested this, that you could appoint a subcommittee of the council to work on some proposed rules and regs to report back to the full body, just like we did with the ethics. It worked for that.
Yeah, and I think people are more likely to come here and have a community discussion than they are at the planning board. It's a little
Right.
little different here, different environment, I think.
Right.
Yeah, sure, Tom.
Tom Ferris, Ward 4. Is this the same moratorium that only applied to the downtown area, or is this a different?
No, this
No,
is city,
This is
citywide.
Yeah.
Citywide, okay.
Yeah.
Because I remember at one point there was one that just involved the downtown area.
Right.
Okay. So this came after that.
Yes,
And was-
this was after the vote on recreational marijuana. Okay.
So, just to clarify again, this moratorium would buy us time, even if the state moratorium collapses, this would buy us the time to craft those regulations. Got it.
Right.
Or form that subcommittee to
Exactly.
The
come up
Maine
with
Municipal-
guidelines, right, that we would,
If I'm not mistaken, Maine Municipal Association had some guide in regards to a standard ordinance that a city could take
That's
a look
what
at.
Patty, that's what Patty
That's what Patty
attached
had.
to
I think-
your agenda. And if you want to adopt a moratorium tonight, yes, we're recommending you adopt, not the one that you adopted a year ago, but the one that's attached.
Right.
What's the difference?
The original language was from Maine Municipal Association at the time when the referendum was first passed. I think they've had a chance to take a better look at it, so they gave some revised language in July of 2017, and so Bill suggested that we substitute the language that was originally proposed by Maine Municipal with the newer version. As far as all the details to it, I really can't speak to all the detail between the two ordinances.
Jennifer?
Hi, Jennifer Bergeron. Is this only on recreational, or are you trying to also
This
put the
is
moratorium as medical as well?
only recreational.
Right.
So that should, hopefully it's clear in the language.
Yep, absolutely.
One other question about that, and this is really, there's no reason I'm asking you this other than I'm ignorant of the answer. But is it my understanding then that, is there still a moratorium in the downtown on medical? Does that moratorium still exist, or is that now sort of subsumed into the
That does
general?
exist.
It does still exist.
That does still exist as well. Okay, so that's where you've got the limitation in the downtown area, but not in the
Correct.
surrounding area. Okay.
Which I guess, I'm assuming would be probably, I think once this can of worms gets open, there's gonna be discussion on everything.
So it seems to me that the germane sections of the moratorium is simply stating that there's a moratorium on retail marijuana establishments, retail stores, social clubs, and production within the city, for retail use within the city limits.
Right.
And there's no way that could somehow be conceived to include medical?
No.
My understanding is that those are different legal categories and the way that the legislation has been written. The terms are 180 days, which would presumably start at the time of it's finally passed, which would not be this session, but the next, correct?
This is actually the second reading of this ordinance.
Be today.
So that
Yes,
it becomes
okay.
effective
It'll be
21
180
days
days from today.
after it's passed. at the
Yeah.
council.
I would say that I have been following some of the debates, and the testimony that was in Augusta. I did not watch all of it. There was a live stream feed for
long.
much of it. It was extensive, a lot of concerns. I think it's definitely in the city's best interest to enact the moratorium at this time, to give us time to think more strategically and clearly about how we want to move forward with this. There are a number of case studies available from towns in states that have had the opportunity to, I will use the word experiment with these kinds of programs and see the impact that they've had. So there's a lot of information already out there that we could draw on. And I think it would be a good idea to create a subcommittee that would consider some of those issues.
Okay.
Can I ask one more question?
Of course.
Under the state guidelines that were passed, do the towns have the authority to collect any surtaxes or surcharges?
I do not know the answer to that.
They're considering.
That might be something that we want to look at,
That's a
whatever
good point.
comes out of here, because that really could be a big boom.
They're considering municipal tax.
Yeah, my understanding was that that was one of the contentious points, with people saying that all of this money should not be going straight to the state, but that it should be allowed to be collected at the municipal level.
That would be the hope.
Remember the meals and lodging tax? That would have worked out pretty well for us too. I never trust Augusta. Jennifer and then Julian, yes.
If you do put together a group, it would be nice to have people from all different viewpoints in that group. So
Yeah.
caregivers or people who are in this industry should be included, so that something can be done where everyone gets a voice, not just people opposed.
The subcommittee would be a subcommittee of counselors, is that correct? That's how generally that's formed, so we would have to think about how to make sure that the voices of people with many different views on this subject are heard by that subcommittee.
Well, I
Before it
attended
gets
a lot of
into
the planning board meetings, and it was a painful process, where I attended the first one, where they got to speak to each other with no knowledge of what anything, no knowledge of the rules,
Yeah.
no knowledge of the legislation, no knowledge of what actually is the law already.
Mm-hmm.
So they were saying things completely inaccurate to each other, as though they're fact. We can't speak until it's time to get up and speak.
Right.
When we finally say it, they say, oh, we should have a work session on that. We really don't know what we're talking about. Come to the second meeting. There's no work session has been held. They talk amongst themselves again in this painful diatribe of incorrect facts. They're stating facts that are not right. And by the time we get to speak, everybody's convinced themselves they know what's going on when they don't know the law. And you get up and you say, well, let me correct you on a few points. Oh, we should have a work session. Meeting 3, no work session, and they vote. So it was an extremely frustrating situation. I would like to see our town have something that's a little less embarrassing, where we actually know, you know, something before we vote on it.
I would be skeptical of the city getting any money from the sale because we don't get any cash from speeding tickets to the city. The state keeps that. And it's always surprising me why they call it recreational or medical. It's really like illegal and medical. We said to the kids, oh, this is the recreational stuff.
Right. All right, is there any other new discussion points? All right, can I get a roll call?
So we would want to move to amend with the substituted language,
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
and then move it all as amended.
Move as amended.
Second.
Can I get a roll call, please?
Counselor Sol?
Yes.
Counselor White? Oh, he's not. You won't answer, will you?
I was waiting for
Like,
Dr.
wait.
Slade. Yeah.
He just abstained.
Always the proxy vote.
Sorry. Counselor Lessing?
Yes.
You?
Yes.
Counselor Champagne?
Yes.
Counselor Tate?
Yes.
Counselor DuPont?
Yes.
Voted 6 in favor and 0 opposed.
Could I raise a point of clarification?
Of course.
So I think Jennifer's point is well taken, that we need to have a serious process. Would this be something that we should consider and maybe come back next week with a proposal for how to move forward with a serious subcommittee or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Next is ordinance 92, 2017.
An ordinance providing for adoption of an ethics ordinance, be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Waterville, acting as municipal officers as follows, that the ethics ordinance be adopted as shown on the attached document.
Can I get a motion to adopt?
Move to adopt.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion on this among the council on the ethics ordinance?
Yeah, I'll make a comment. So Counselor Tate, Counselor Sol, and I met as a subcommittee in regards to review the recommendation from the Ethics Committee that was proposed. My understanding is that this was a months, if not years-long process to get this through the Ethics Committee and to come up with a proposal to the council as a whole. And first and foremost, I want to thank anyone in here tonight that was part of the Ethics Committee or watching on TV for your time and effort in putting the proposal to the council. I also want to thank the citizens that kind of set the wheels in motion as we formed the committee and discussed the ethics ordinance in great detail. Out of the committee that we had with the three of us, we had the city solicitor, Bill Lee, and as well as Mike Roy and Patty as well. And what we did was we took the recommendation that came out of committee and took certain pieces to that we felt kind of identified and defined what we have done as a council as a whole over the past year. And I'll explain that by saying, over the past year, more so than other council collectives over years past, we've actually had a spot in the agenda where we disclose our conflict of interest. That was something that started by Chair Councilor Sol, Chair Steve Sol, excuse me. And he basically started that. We memorialized that in the ordinance itself. by having a requirement of all planning boards and, the planning board and the city council to disclose conflicts of interest ahead of the meeting itself. In addition to that, we have a disclosure form that was proposed by the Ethics Committee as well, that we took to adopt as part of the ordinance. So any new appointed member of any board, any elected official, in addition to department heads, if I'm not mistaken, have to file the disclosure form prior to getting sworn in. And beyond that, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I can piece together, but we have essentially defined all of the city's roles in here, which was not there before. We had a very limited ethics ordinance that was probably about 2 paragraphs long.
Yeah.
We now have some more teeth in regards to what is and is not a conflict of interest. I think it's a great compromise amongst the committee that we had, and I think we should have some overwhelming support. I don't know if there's any questions. Council.
No, I think it's, I commend the council's work on this, because this was, like you said, this was something that's been on advisement for well over a year, between the first committee and, of course, the council's being involved in dissecting and taking a more specified look at everything. It's a very robust ethics rule of conduct. When you look at this and all the complexities of it compared to what we had, which was basically 2 rough paragraphs of, very broad spectrum of what the ordinance stood for the community. And I think everybody's work is to be commended on this. I'm very satisfied looking at this and seeing this as a platform or a template for, future ones of not only code of ethics, but other ordinances as well. So I would definitely support this.
Other discussion? Let's get back to the podium and tell us your name.
Julian Payne, Ward 5. This is not controversial, so I would like to thank the council for working on that and the ethics committee. I had reached out to them to be here in case there was any questions, but they didn't seem to feel that was necessary. I'd hoped someone would have represented them here. I do feel that the councilors that worked on this, and I'm saying the councilors that worked on this were a good cross-section of the council. I think it was a good base. It was a diverse bunch of councilors that worked on it. Certainly when I walk my wards, conflict was a real thing. You might dismiss it as being part of, maybe not in Waterville, but it's certainly questioned on a state level. You hear it on a national level. So why wouldn't we think about it at a local level? I think by the time that people came forward and had concerns and questions, the charter was very outdated, very skimpy, and there was definitely a need for some serious thought and dialogue on that issue. So it's a good start, I think that it goes a long way. There's a couple of concerns that I thought were missed, which aren't really ethical issues. They're probably more of a charter thought if the city council is looking at these issues and charter issues down the road. One of them would be, as a school board member, I'm not allowed to have a spouse in the school system. So I wonder how that plays out if in 2 years my wife takes out Nick Champagne and sits on the council seat while not voting on line item as a councillor, giving me the budget where I do vote on line items. So I wonder how that pertains to spouses of school board members sitting on a council seat. The other thing was if you were to share the same boss as a councillor, if you were Public Works and you shared the boss of a Public Works because you shared with other cities, that's happening with consolidation and things. So it was really just those concerns on that, but I think that it's definitely a step in the right direction for Waterville, I think. Thank you. Yeah.
I wanted to say that it was a great, I won't say pleasure, but a great opportunity for us to get together and work through some of these contentious issues. I want to particularly thank, Patty, who kept us on track, and there were moments when people were throwing up their hands and keeping us grounded and focused and recognizing the excellent work that the Ethics Committee had done. I also want to say that one of the things that came up consistently from across, as Mr. Payne said, the spectrum of counselors was the need to balance the recognition that this is a small town and that we want to welcome citizen participation and encourage people to be actively involved. At the same time, we recognize the need for transparency, disclosure, and addressing the concerns that people have about conflict of interest. I think this document does a great job addressing those things. I think it's we've cut it down, if we can say, from 9 pages to 5, which is part of what we want to do to going towards the encouraging participation. I think it's a lot easier to read, but it really keeps the central concerns that were addressed by the Ethics Committee. So thank everyone who participated in that process.
Thank you. All right. Roll call.
Yes. Counselor Sol?
Yes.
Counselor Lessing?
Yes.
Counselor Mayu?
Yes.
Counselor Champagne?
Yes.
Counselor Tate?
Yes.
Counselor Dupont?
Yes.
4 to 6 in favor and 0 opposed.
On to new business, Resolution 18, 2018.
A resolution providing for waiver of foreclosure of municipal tax liens. Be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Waterville, acting as the municipal officers as follows, that the municipal officers authorize the treasurer of the City of Waterville to file waivers of foreclosure in accordance with Title 36, main revised statutes annotated Section 944 to prevent the automatic foreclosure of tax liens filed against mobile homes. An up-to-date list will be provided of these mobile homes at the meeting.
This is,
Okay, move to adopt.
Move to adopt.
Second.
it's an annual exercise that we do. Some of you may have remembered we did the same thing last year. Authorizing the waivers does not mean we won't collect the taxes. But what it does mean is we don't want to take possession of any mobile homes that don't have enough value to even cover the amount that we're due. We'd end up incurring quite an expense on the acquisition of some of these. But last year, as Mrs. Cody told me, we had approximately 20, and out of that 20, 18 ended up paying the taxes due by the foreclosure date. We had already waived them, but they came through and paid anyway. And there's no reason to believe that similar thing won't happen again this time. So I think it's an important thing to do in the event that 1 or 2 or 3 don't pay. We don't end up owning mobile homes in lots where we don't own the lot. We're renting the space for the mobile home to sit on. We've got to move the mobile home, it's not worth it.
Could I just take the moment, this time, I think it's appropriate to also thank Mrs. Cody for her hard work. 2 of the other graphs that were important in there were the fact that our tax liens are down and that our collections are up, and that's a lot because of your work, so thank you for all that. We know you work hard and you work with people to help them through a lot of tough situations and get the taxes collected. Thank you.
Thank you for saying that, because that graph did show the result of that kind of work.
Absolutely. To be commended, very much so.
Any questions on this resolution? All right, all in favor? Next is Resolution 19, 2018.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you. Council White is here.
In spirit.
It took us a few, but we got there.
A resolution providing for issuance of secondhand license to J. Colello, doing business as You Broke It.
Motion to adopt?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Next, Resolution 20, 2018.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for authorizing renewal of a special amusement license to Stephen Reynolds, doing business as TJ's Classic Billiards.
Move to adopt.
Second.
You're on it, Counselor. Any discussion? All in favor? Next is Resolution 21, 2018.
Move to read by title
And
only.
second on that.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for authorizing renewal of a special amusement license to Elks Lodge of Waterville, Maine, incorporating doing business as Elks Lodge number 905.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Patty, did you get Nick's
Yeah.
abstention?
I did, thank you. Thank you for reminding me, because I missed it.
Yes. Next is Order 22, 2018.
Move to read by title on that.
Second.
All in favor?
An order providing for approval of forfeiture.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Order 23, 2018.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Move to adopt.
An order providing for approval of forfeiture.
Jumping again.
That's good, I can all
Oh, boy.
Should have coffee before the meeting.
Council, you're up.
Move to adopt.
All in favor? Next, Order 24, 2018.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
An order providing for acceptance of donations for the Riverwalk project.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Ordinance 25, 2018.
Move to read by title only.
And second.
All in favor?
An ordinance providing for amendment of the licenses and permits ordinance, Article 4, mobile or temporary food vendors.
I got a motion to adopt?
Move to
Move to
adopt.
adopt.
Second.
Losing steam, guys.
Yeah.
Is there any discussion on this one?
Just curious what the major,
Yeah, I was
major
wondering.
changes are, I guess. I see
Yeah,
that.
Patty has done a very, very good job, I think, in trying to make this ordinance a lot clearer than what it has been. So essentially, what we're required to do on the ordinance are license mobile food vendors. And what the ordinance tries to prevent as much as possible is a mobile food vendor coming in and setting up shop next to a permanent food vendor who's paying property taxes and other things that the mobile won't. So one of the key things is a mobile food vendor can't be in the downtown district. And that district is defined, it's got definite boundaries. The second thing is a mobile food vendor can't be within 250 feet of another permanent food service provider.
Correct.
And that's been a source for a lot of confusion and just, well, how's the 250 measured? From what line to what line? Patty has suggested, I think, something very helpful here. And the other thing is, too, what if the mobile food vendor is not offering anything that is presently offered at McDonald's or Burger King or a permanent place? So there's also that thing of, if they're offering the same type of food, then you're gonna have to decide if it's a fair thing for that license to be issued or not. So some of it comes back to you, but some of it, with this rewrite, allows the clerk to do the simple, straightforward approvals, where not everyone has to come here and get denied. It says right here, you can't be in the business district. She can do that, because it says right here, no need for the person to come here and find that out. So I think the changes that you see in the summary, 1, 2, 3 bullets, summarize pretty well the three key things that we tried to make the ordinance a lot clearer on.
I don't know if it has nothing to do with the changes that you had, but the only one concern about the mobile food vendor ordinance was stemmed from a conversation I had with a business that was located near where we were approving a mobile vendor license. And their concern was that they were fine with them being there. It was more or less a concern about them using their parking. How, and how to deal with that. I mean, if they find that there are some people using their parking lot for the mobile food vendor, I mean, should they be calling the police and just having them removed? Or, I mean, is there a more easier, less painful way to do that?
In that situation, it's gonna be private versus private.
Right.
I was kind of wondering if, like, before they start, they establish where they expect their patrons to.
And that's really
Park.
part of the ordinance, is
Kinda
they
like
have
we
to
do
have
for
written
brick and
permission
mortar.
from the landowner currently. So if they don't have written permission to use that parcel, if they're using it as parking, then that doesn't constitute, meeting the criteria in the ordinance.
Mhm.
So that would be it would be a violation of the ordinance, if you will.
Yeah, so they do have to provide for some of that, but if the patrons showing up just happen to park on someone else's land, that's when it gets difficult.
Part of the difficult part of administering this ordinance is the ordinance stated you couldn't be within 250 feet of someone selling similar type food. So that's so subjective that, I might feel like a taco is the same as a cheeseburger, but maybe they don't think that.
Right.
Maybe the cheeseburger establishment that's there doesn't feel that it's competition. But that subjectivity is where it's a slippery slope. So I would rather give the opportunity to the person that has a license within the 250 feet to come, the current license, a permanent fixed location, to be able to either say, I have no issue with it, or, yeah, I do have an issue with it, and then that could be kind of vetted here rather than, making a determination in the office.
Yeah.
And it really, to give a public hearing, the establishment may or may not be watching the city council agendas with bated breath to see if a mobile food vendor is coming across the street from them, but if we give them notice, they have an opportunity to come and be heard. So,
Exactly.
when people have a complaint about that, they come to my office, with frustration about the way the ordinance is written, so.
I like that you mentioned the notice, because that particular business owner had no idea that this
Right.
vendor was coming in.
Right.
And they were fine with it. I mean, quite honestly, they were receptive to them being there because they thought that maybe it would bring more patrons over to where they are, and it works out for
And
everybody.
we generally get the phone call after the license has been issued, and the vendor drives by and sees that temporary vendor set up.
Pork tacos.
I think the
Yes,
mayor will
could you-
give you permission.
Yes.
But let's not forget here that even though the food might not be in direct competition with another vendor, the fact that another vendor's there still will detract from that permanent vendor. I mean, in my ward, if there's a fish and chip shop and a cheeseburger shop within 4 miles from my house,
I know where you're going.
well, I'm gonna split it between the two. I'm not gonna eat at the same place every week. So even though it's not the same kind of food, it is still some detraction from the regular licensed owner.
Well, that's what the public hearing will do. It'll allow for that discussion to happen.
Though in a competitive environment, typically,
Oh, sure.
if a place gets known as a destination where people go to eat, ultimately the collective should be bringing more
Yeah.
customers
Yeah.
to that area.
Has the city thought about having like a permanent location? I know some cities have like a section of town, or maybe down by Hedda Falls, where any food vendor could go.
Well, we've talked about that with the continued improvement at Hedda Falls. That's very likely a place where it could happen.
Yeltsin Street, please.
Yetton Street, not sure.
Okay.
Anything else? I want to thank Patty too for all her work on this.
And I would mention that Bill took a look at the language that we had proposed, and I passed out some clarifying language that he included, which was much better written probably than what I proposed. I'm not ashamed to say, so I would say that the second language that I passed out would be what we'll include with the second reading as well.
Any other discussion? All in favor? All right. You're up, Mickey.
3 items. One, Councilor Tate already mentioned, thank you for mentioning the PK.
Pacha.
I'd say it different every single time, so I'm just going to say PK, Friday night, 7 o'clock, be there, Thomas College. It's a lot of
Especially
fun.
if you've never been to one, especially. They're way cooler than you'd ever imagine.
Yeah,
Have you done one?
they're well done. You should go.
I was a
MC?
MC, thank you.
Yeah, you should do one.
Ah, right.
Like the mayor's view, 25.
Nobody
20
wants to
minutes.
hear that.
Item 2 is a meeting tomorrow afternoon at 4, Finance Committee, School, City, Finance Committee, Councilor Sol and Councilor Mayu. the mayor, myself, Heather, and on the city, school side is Eric Haley and Paula, and 2 of his board members.
And this is
So,
part- this-
just started beginning discussion, how the current year budget going, what about next year, what about the breakup of OS 92, how does that affect finances? I don't know if they know that yet, but why not start a discussion? So that starts tomorrow at 4.
Part of an effort to be a little more proactive in a more formal manner, because I was actually proactive in the last couple of years, but
Yeah,
nobody
but-
gets back to me, so if you make a committee meeting, they tend to come.
This meeting tomorrow is, could be open to the public. Yep. No reason why not. Right in the first floor of City Hall. The IT training.
I was trying to get an invite to see what's going on. I'll be there.
You'll be included, you'll be
Yeah, okay.
allowed in, for
Yeah,
sure,
thank you.
as will anyone else. Third, my last item is the Riverwalk Committee meets Thursday at 4. Important meeting, so we're very excited about the capital campaign we have that we're just about ready to unveil, so you'll hear more about that at your next meeting. That's all I have, unless there are any questions.
Move to adjourn.
Councilman White is not here to move to adjourn.
I know.